Hey, it's Dr. Jaime, and let's talk about the importance of salt and electrolytes. If you're living the low carb life like me, your requirements are actually much higher. And there's only one source that we trust in our home, and it's the people and products at Redmond Real Salt. They keep us coming back for more every time. Real salt's an all natural, unrefined sea salt harvested from an ancient ocean. It's full of natural minerals that make it healthy, delicious, and pink or red looking. They're also the best selling brand in America's health and food stores. Redmond Real Salt is so pure, it's free of pollutants and microplastics found in many other natural refined salts. The Redmond Salt Deposit is in Redmond, Utah, where the team enjoys award winning work conditions and generous pay. And since they own and control the whole process, you can be sure that real salt comes to you through their world class production facilities in its unrefined, mineral rich, delicious state, exactly as nature intended. Redmond has amazing natural products, including salt, electrolytes, toothpaste, and so much more. So check out the entire line at www.redmond.life, where you can use my code DrFit, that's DRFIT, for a discount on all Redmond Real Salt and Relight products. Welcome to the Fit and Fabulous podcast with Dr. Jaime Seaman. Hello, everybody. It is Dr. Jaime, and welcome back to the Fit and Fabulous podcast. I'm so excited that you're joining us today. And I just want to say thank you for every episode that you've listened to, every episode that you have shared with your friends, every time you leave reviews and comments. You guys really help us get these topics out to the world. And so we really, really appreciate that from the bottom of our hearts. Well, on today's episode, I want to introduce you all to Lance Shutler. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a bachelor's degree in health science, and he is the CEO and owner of Ascent Nutrition, a unique holistic nutrition company. He's also a contributing health and wellness writer at the Epoch Times. His work also includes the topics of regenerative agriculture, resource-based economies, and quantum technologies. I'm super excited, Lance, to have you on the Fit and Fabulous podcast, so welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Jaime. I'm also very excited to be here.
I think the most important thing we could talk about is Nebraska and Iowa football, but our team is horrible right now, so we are going to pivot and talk about something else.
Iowa, I think, has won the last 6 games in a row for football, I believe, but this year,
don't have to rub it in.
and Iowa might not be that good this year, so I think it's a toss-up.
Okay, well, I won't be at the game because it's at Iowa this year, but you better know I'm a tried and true Cornhusker fan. So, okay, well, I want to talk a little bit about what you do at Ascent Nutrition and just tell us a little bit about your background so people kind of understand who you are more.
Yeah, so I've really been into health and wellness really my whole life, but in different areas. So when I was young, I started playing sports and, I played football, basketball, baseball, and I was just really interested in my health in those ways at that time, but I didn't really understand nutrition much in high school. And when I got to college, I knew that I wanted to do something in the health and wellness field. And so I started studying pre-chiropractic, pre-physical therapy, and then I pivoted later in college towards health science and health coaching. And so that's what I graduated with. But with that, I shortly after started working in the nutraceutical industry and started to work as a health coach, as a vitamin buyer, and working for other companies. And so I was able to get a good perspective in this industry from different angles. So from buying, how to source, and then the different marketing aspects that are used. And really what I wanted to do, Dr. Jaime, is with Ascent Nutrition is create a company that we're sourcing things the right way, meaning pure and clean, and going to the source, the original source as much as we can. And then also being very honest and truthful in our marketing, and just being very integrous with that, because there are a lot of gimmicks out there. And, I was able to see some of those gimmicks and understand, okay, how do we actually tell people the truth without over promising, and with actually being clear with them on what, these nutrients are, or what things can do in the body.
Yeah, I really respect that because it's a billion-dollar industry and there definitely are great products out there, but I think it's hard for the average consumer to navigate that. And I think you're totally right. People are really clever with marketing, especially with social media. They get one good name behind something, and it's mostly for profit. So let's talk a little bit about the modern, American modern human diet and kind of the problems with it, I guess.
Yeah, so I think the fundamental problem with our standard American diet, or just a typical diet that a person in the West will consume, is that it's promoting inflammation, or it's promoting too much inflammation. We both know that we need some inflammation in the body for the body to actually work, but too much, uh, elicits so many different effects in the body, and really is what many people say as the underlying root issue of diseases and conditions is too much inflammation. Obviously, there's cascading effects that go into different conditions, but the underlying systemic issue is too much inflammation, and that really can come about from several different things, but clearly in the diet, um, what we consume certainly can either promote inflammation or modulate inflammation.
Yeah, I always think of the body with this word homeostasis, right? That we learn in medical school, which is just this very like slow undulating line where it's always trying to balance like glucose homeostasis. It's trying to control the pH of your bloodstream. It's trying to control the temperature in your body. And I love that kind of analogy of thinking about pro-inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory things. And I guess it's not even just the diet, just like everything that we do in our lifestyle. And I couldn't agree with you more there. So let's talk about fat in the diet, because one of the areas that really play in is the brain, and we're going to dive into things like DHA. But can we just talk about fat in the human diet? Like, what are the different types of fat, and why are they important, especially when it comes to brain health?
Yeah, definitely. So the main three types, I would say, saturated fat, and then unsaturated fats like polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. So saturated fat, without going into the specific biochemistry, it just simply means that all the carbon atoms are filled up, or they're linked with hydrogen atoms, and so it creates a what we call like a stable fat, in that it's solid at room temperature. And those, there's a lot of topics, or people will talk about saturated fats and those being issues for us. But I think what we're finding now, as more and more research comes out, it's not that saturated fats are the issue per se. It's but partly in that sometimes those fats can be oxidized, and so they're damaged by free radicals, and then that leads to, a whole host of issues. And so saturated fats aren't the culprit, as we've been taught in a lot of these different circles, but of course, everything truly in moderation. And then going to, the monounsaturated fats, examples like that is olive oil, avocados as well. Macadamias have a little bit. And then the polyunsaturated, which typically we think of it as omega-3s. Those are like the main fats that we think of within those unsaturated. And that means that the hydrogen atoms are not saturating those carbon bonds. And what that ultimately means is that because they're shaped differently, they can perform different actions in the body.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the difference between, you had mentioned omega-3. When somebody listening hears omega-3 and omega-6, what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So omega-3, we've heard of essential fatty acids. Essential meaning we have to get them in the diet. And omega-3s is that one of those carbon bonds is at the third place in this chain. So they call it omega-3. But what these are just fats that is incorporated into every cellular membrane. And these omega-3s are similar to the omega-6s in that they are in cellular membranes. But again, because they're shaped differently, they perform different actions. So just in short, what they're fats that we have to get in the diet, and the omega-3s, and the 6s, we also need to get those in the diet too, but predominantly at less than what we are getting, with the standard American diet.
Yeah, so I hear, a lot of people talk about the ratio in which they're consumed. And can you talk a little bit about that? 100 years ago, what humans consumed as a ratio from omega-3 and omega-6s to today's modern diet?
Yeah, so I've seen several different articles out there and posts and information relating to what this ratio is and what we had as ancestors. And I think, it can go all the way from 1 to 1 or 4 to 1. And that's typically what we want to aim towards right now. But I've seen figures anywhere from the standard American diet is promoting anywhere from 20 to 50 to sometimes 100 to 1 in terms of omega-6s to omega-3s. And, just like you said, we really want that ratio to be as close as possible because we need balance. There's a lot of also misconception about omega-6s in that they're bad. We shouldn't get them. It's not that they're bad. Again, it's that there needs to be balance, and that when we have too many of the sixes, it's promoting inflammation instead of when it's more balanced of the 3 to 6, that's going to actually promote modulating inflammation and promote homeostasis, just like you were talking about.
So what are dietary sources of omega-3s and omega-6s that would explain why we're eating 10 to 20 times more omega-6s than omega-3s in the diet?
Yeah, so the first one, canola oil, obviously that's in a lot of processed foods. That's very high in the sixes. The sunflower oils, safflower oils, soybean oil is another one. Those things are commonly in the processed foods that we see, and those are, again, very high in the sixes and going to be promoting that inflammatory state. Whereas on the opposite end, the omega-3s, the best food sources commonly are salmon and other fish like anchovy and sardines. You can also get some in walnuts and flax seeds, but very small amounts, and they actually need to be converted. But then also what you can do is you can go to the algae, because the algae actually makes the omegas, and then the fish eat the algae. And so that's why the fish, commonly is the best source of them, because they're eating the algae, which is the primary source of all those fatty acids.
It's kind of like how the cow eats the grass and the cow gives me all the nutrients.
Right. Exactly.
I don't want to eat grass, so I'm really glad the cows do it.
Yeah. Wouldn't be fun.
Yeah. Okay. You'd mentioned a little bit about plant sources of omega-3s. So can we talk a little bit about kind of defining ALA, EPA, and DHA? So these are all types of omega-3 fatty acids. You had kind of mentioned essential basically for us to consume. Can we talk about the difference between those for a minute?
Yeah. So the ALA, alpha linolenic acid, is commonly found in flax seeds and flaxseed oil, walnuts, and other plant sources like that, some other nuts and seeds. But those need to be ultimately converted into DHA and EPA. And there's an enzyme that takes place to help that happen. But in us humans, if we're taking in the omega-3s, the ALA from walnuts or flax seeds, the conversion to the EPA and DHA is actually quite low. Mm-hmm. Now, going with your question, what is DHA? DHA stands for docosahexaenoic acid, and EPA is icosa pentaenoic acid, and it really just signifies the different bonds that are in there. But what they do in terms of the function in the body, some similarities, but also the major difference is that DHA is the primary component of neuronal membranes, and it's really important for the brain and nervous system in particular. And EPA has been commonly shown also for the brain, but also for cardiovascular effects too.
I want to highlight what you said there for a minute, because I got into the comment section of one of my recent posts with a guy recently talking about this. So ALA is basically plant source omega-3s. And you hear people say, eat walnuts, eat flax, eat chia for these omega-3s. And you had kind of highlighted that there's really a small percent that actually get converted into the EPA and DHA, which is what we need them to be turned into. There's also genetic SNPs where people have even slower conversion with this enzyme. And I actually have done testing on myself, and I have that genetic SNP, which makes sense why I feel so good on, more of a heavy meat-based seafood type diet, because I probably couldn't get a lot of my omega-3s that way. Can we talk about what the recommended intake is of EPA and DHA?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a really fascinating topic because as it relates to the ratio, that's clearly important, but something with the ratio is that the percentages of what we actually have in the body is different. So we could have a good omega 3 to 6 ratio, but if we're not getting enough of those omegas in our diet, that ratio actually doesn't matter. And so, what does matter is how much are we actually getting. And so there's a test called the omega 3 index percentage, and what that's looking at is the actual amount of omega 3s in the red blood cell membranes. So then you can actually show how much of these fats are actually in our body. And what they've found is that anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day is enough over a period of 3 to 6 months. It really depends on the study and the person, obviously, but 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day over a period of 3 to 6 months is actually enough to raise that index percentage to the ideal levels. Now, again, obviously, it's going to be based on someone's lifestyle, what else they're eating, what else they're incorporating, but that's what's been commonly shown. And the average American is at about 4% for that index percentage. And that's like 95% of the American population isn't getting enough omega 3s in the diet. And so aiming towards those levels can actually be an actual regimen that can be implemented for someone to raise those levels. And tying this back into food, so this really like kind of hits home of how much that is. If a person eats an average serving of salmon, it's about 1,250 milligrams of DHA, and of course
How big of a piece of salmon?
3 ounces.
Okay.
And this was a number coming from I can't quite remember the governmental agency, but they were looking at this. And if you want to get then 1,000 to 2,000 per day, that's 7 to 14,000 per week. To get to those levels, a person would need to eat 5 to 10 servings of salmon per week. And, there's maybe some people who are doing that, but obviously not everyone's doing that. And so, it's a good baseline of, okay, what am I getting in the diet and where do I want to go to actually have marked physiological effects and changes in the body.
Are there other foods besides eating 5 to 10 servings of salmon that have significant amounts of EPA or DHA?
Yeah, other fish, sardines, anchovy, oysters, those are the big ones. Some of the meats will have some omegas, but it's definitely not as much, or the omega 3s, it's not as much as the fish sources.
What about farmed salmon versus wild caught salmon?
Yeah, wild caught for sure, because they're, most closely in nature, whereas in the farming aspect of it, they're most likely being fed a very poor diet. So they aren't even going to be able to get the omega 3s that they need to get, which then we would consume by eating them. There's, of course, pesticide issues that are, taking place within the water there in the farming factories. You don't want to consume those because there's literally no need for it. And just other heavy metal concerns that might come with factory farming. Obviously, it depends on the situation, but that's more so from certain contaminated waters.
Yeah. And I've had people ask me too, with wild caught, concern with mercury exposure and heavy metals even. And Dominic D'Agostino actually recently shared something about it. And it was basically, if you consume enough of it that you're getting adequate DHA, and he's had his heavy metals checked. This guy eats like loads of salmon, and there was no issue. So it's almost like if you're eating enough the DHA, there's really not any concern with mercury levels. And we know that too from pregnancy data. We tell pregnant patients, don't eat more than 12 ounces per week of fish. And we're going to dive into this in a minute, pregnancy and DHA. But it's incredible, right? Because now you're risking low intake of omega 3s and DHA. And there's been studies where these patients ate 40 ounces or more of salmon. They looked at like indigenous populations. They eat loads of seafood, and there was no problem with mercury toxicity. So for pregnant people listening, this whole thing about limiting fish because of mercury, you'd be far better off eating the fish for your baby's brain development than you should be worrying about worrying about the mercury consumption. Okay, so let's okay, back to this omega-3 6 blood test you were talking about that you can test. I order this test often in my clinic, and I would probably argue that I think you quoted like what, 4% for average?
Yeah.
I mean, I have not found one normal lab this year, and it's almost October. And I'm finding levels like 1.4%, 1.9%. I mean, that's low, like real low. So you guys can ask your doctor to check this test. You can get it checked and you can see what your levels are, and you should know what they are. And we've highlighted the optimal intake at being somewhere in the range of, you said 1 to 2 grams per day.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about pregnancy. Let's talk about, because most prenatal vitamins contain about 200 milligrams of DHA on average. So can we talk about pregnancy and neurogenesis of the fetal brain and the importance of DHA there?
Yeah, definitely. So like we talked about, DHA is incorporated in every cellular membrane and specifically in neuronal membranes. So those in the brain and throughout the nervous system. So the eyes, amongst the cardiovascular system as well, very concentrated, but particularly concentrated in the eyes, in the brain, and throughout the nervous system. And what that's doing is it's helping the electrical conductivity actually at a very fundamental level. That's more, we'll get into that with the light aspect of DHA, but it helps neurons to actually grow and develop in their proper ways. And so, like we talked about earlier, it's an essential fatty acid, meaning we have to get in the diet. And the reason we have to is because it is an actual component of our cells. So it's not just like a nutrient that, like an herb or something that we can take every now and then and have just some sort of effect from it. We actually need the DHA for our cells and our neurons to develop fully, and also for the eyes. So a pregnant mother particularly needs a lot of these omega-3s for herself and also for her baby that's being developed. And so they've done several different studies on pregnancy and nursing mothers with DHA. And, just some of the ones that I've seen and that I'll quote is that the higher intake levels of DHA during pregnancy and then during nursing and afterwards, the child was able to have better cognitive skills, social skills, their learning ability increases, their motor skills are better. IQ has been shown to increase. I know that there's some studies showing varying results to that, but I think it's pretty well established that if you're developing the brain and nervous system in a fundamental way with these fatty acids, then IQ, will go up, at least in some ways.
So fascinating. So during pregnancy, what do you think if a non-pregnant patient is supposed to consume 1 to 2 grams, what do you think a pregnant patient would need to fulfill her and her baby's needs?
So it obviously depends on the person and what they're consuming. And the studies that I've shown or that I've seen, it's anywhere from, they were saying 1 gram to 1.8 to sometimes 2.5 grams. But, as it relates to the omega-3 index, I personally would think that a pregnant mother really would want around 3 grams, maybe more. But it really depends on a lot of things, as you know, but around that is definitely a good dose. 2 to 3 grams, you're going to definitely be giving the body a large amount that it can use.
Yeah, I'm going to highlight a study at the end of this podcast looking at preterm birth, and they used the cutoff was basically a gram is where they saw definitely some benefit. Is there risk of consuming too much?
If a person's taking certain medications like blood thinning medications, you definitely wouldn't want to take too much of the omegas because it could compound the effects. But in general, no. It will depend on the situation, but in general, no.
Yeah, I always tell patients that, whole food sources, like you clearly aren't going to overdose on salmon, but you do have to be careful when it comes to supplementation because you could be taking massive amounts of, and I've seen patients come in with it's usually not DHA, but they've got, 17 bottles. They come in with like a backpack, and, there's an overlap of like things on all of these different bottles, and more isn't necessarily better. So
Right.
something you definitely have to be cognizant about. Okay, so let's go back to talking about DHA as a nerve conduction agent and the connection to sunlight. I don't want to get into like quantum physics, but can you start to like make some connections for people there?
Yeah. Okay. So the eyes, the retina of the eyes, we have around 91 million cones and 4.5 million rods. Okay. And those are going to be receptors of light. And so what happens literally is DHA accumulates in those rods and those cones in the retina, and it acts as a photon converter. And so it takes light from the sun, and once those photons hit our eyes, it actually converts it from a photonic light energy signal to an electrical signal that the brain and nervous system can then read and process and do what it needs to do. So there are sort of quantum aspects, but we won't go into it. But there is a published study by a PhD neuroscientist. He's some human nutrition PhD as well. I can't remember the title, but he's over in London, and he published this paper. And he essentially said that with that act of how DHA converts photons to an electrical signal, it's acting like a semiconductor in how it can convert signals. So, it's very interesting in the properties of what DHA has and what it can do. And part of the structure of it, the tail that it's slightly bent, it actually keeps the cells fluid, the cellular fluidity keeps them fluid and mobile and agile, and so they can adapt. They can keep toxins out better that way. They can get nutrients in. They can signal to other cells in a more efficient way. And DHA, because of that, it has a spin on this tail to where it keeps them in perpetual motion, and that's part of how some of that energy is transferred amongst the neurons through DHA.
It's fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about the brain too, and just neurogenesis, maybe like across the lifetime?
Yeah. So when a baby is being born, I read this on
Just delivered to today.
amazing. That so Harvard put this paper out. It was more of an article showing that babies, when after they're born, they can produce at times up to 1 million synapses per second because of how much neurogenesis and neuroplasticity is taking place in their brain. And again, DHA is the most important fatty acid. Obviously, there's others that are needed and many other nutrients, but DHA is the most important fatty acid. And what that is doing is they found that it upregulates a couple proteins, one called nerve growth factor, another one called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and BDNF they've labeled as, it's more of a marketing thing, but they've called it Miracle Grow. And it's a good analogy for what it does, in that they call it Miracle Grow for the brain because it helps neurons to repair themselves, regenerate, and actually new neurons to spontaneously generate too. And of course, repair the synapses, the dendrites, the axons, and just help with the nervous system health. So those two proteins are upregulated. DHA is actually a precursor to something called synaptamide, and that also relates to neurogenesis with neurite outgrowth and then synaptogenesis. So synapses are formed. And so for synaptamide to be produced, we need adequate amounts of DHA. And then there's other genes that are upregulated or turned on or off, depending on what it is with DHA in the nervous system. It regulates something called SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that regulates cycles of light and dark and hormones, like melatonin along those lines, and really helps to set the circadian rhythm if that is balanced. And DHA plays a role in regulating that too. And it's really interesting because if you think about going back to what we were talking about, the sun, and how the algae in the sea or in water actually is creating this DHA and these fatty acids. It's getting it from the sun. And then literally the DHA is regulating the cycles of light and dark in the brain.
Fascinating. So fascinating. Okay, so let's talk about the algae and DHA supplements, because I think that when it comes, people have always asked me, like, what are your top supplements? And I think if you read the literature, fish oil is recommended for like everything, depression, arthritis. Like, I mean, it seems like a cure all, right? But I think you've highlighted why DHA is so important. But let's talk a little bit about fish oil supplements and the problem with most fish oil supplements.
Yeah. So, just first off, there's a lot of processing. And so, just from an environmental standpoint, that creates a lot of unnecessary environmental waste. And I'm not even talking about pollutants like heavy metals, and not that, but just the overall process. If you think of what does it take for us humans from a business perspective to actually source and create fish oils, it's a lot of inefficiencies. And what can come from that as well is some pesticide issues, some heavy metal issues. Not, it's not anywhere near what the marketing have told us of, like you said, we don't need to be concerned about the heavy metals like they've told us. Though in some situations it can be a concern. It just really depends on that situation. But the fish oils, they also, when they process them, they have to do certain processes that will sometimes denature those long chain polyunsaturated compounds. And so you're not actually getting those omega-3s in their triglyceride form that the body knows how to actually use and utilize.
Yeah, and they oxidize. I mean, sometimes I think when they've looked at studies, pulled, 10 different supplements off the shelf, some of them don't even have the dosages in them that they say they do. Some of them are oxidized, some of them, so it's talk about your product at Ascent Nutrition, the algae oil, and why it's different than a lot of the standard fish oil supplements that people would find on the shelves.
Yeah. So just like we were talking about earlier with the algae, that's the source of these omegas and of that DHA in particular. And so what we do is we go to the source. We cultivate and grow this a particular algae strain in hermetically sealed tanks, and then we water extract it, clean water, and we water extract this and are able to actually pull out a very high dose of the DHA and EPA. And something very interesting is that because we water extract, we don't have to change the natural ratio of what's naturally present in this strain of algae, which is 1,000 milligrams of DHA to 10 milligrams of EPA. And so that's really important that we don't have to change or denature the structure of those compounds. Even other algae oil companies, based on how they're hexane, or in particular hexane extracting, it will actually change the makeup and the ratio of those fatty acids. And so there's a lot of marketing spin around why we need, an exorbitant amount of EPA. And it's not that it's wrong, or it's not that it's misleading. It's just simply that with the fish oil studies, there's naturally more EPA in it because of the way that they're processed. And so those studies have been crafted around having higher amounts of EPA. But what I've found from a couple sources on PubMed is that the natural ratio present in us humans, in the brain in particular, of DHA to EPA is about 250 to 300 to 1 in favor of DHA. So, for the brain and nervous system, we really need a lot more DHA. And so with this water-based extraction, we have a 100 to 1 ratio, which is the closest that I've found amongst all the algae oil companies, and I think very close amongst other fish oil products too. But my point with all of this is never to put down any of these companies or these products, because they're all going to help people, or most of them.
Mhm.
It's just that, again, what we're doing is we want to go to the source and offer the cleanest version of it, and give it at the most concentrated, potent that we can, while being safe.
Yeah, something certainly better than nothing. What does algae oil taste like?
So it tastes like algae, or you could say fish, but I say algae because if you think, what you could say is fish actually tastes like
Fish
algae.
tastes like that because of
Yes,
the algae.
yes. So that's the way to describe it. But this product, it's very mild. It does have a slightly, fishy or algae or sea taste, but it's not like, you're gargling down fish oil. It has a much more mild taste than traditional fish oil. Um, and you can just see you can literally see the cleanliness of it, of how pure that golden oil is. And with that water-based extraction we're doing.
Do you have to keep it out of sunlight? Do you have to keep it refrigerated? How do you store algae oil?
It's definitely best out of the sunlight. It actually doesn't have to be kept in the refrigerator. It certainly can be. I do mine. Just it's easier for me that way, but it doesn't have to be. As
Does it
long as
take
it's
some of
not,
the taste off if you keep it in the fridge?
yeah.
Yeah, I used to take fish oil capsules. I have a background in nutrition in college, but I was kind of like, a college kid, like you only know so much. But in my nutrition classes, they're like DHA, DHA, DHA. So I run to Walmart on my college budget and get whatever cheapest fish oil supplement I can find. And somebody told me if you put them in the freezer, like you won't get like the fish like burps or whatever after you take it. So that's what I used to do in college with my fish oil supplement.
Amazing. Yeah.
No idea what I was doing, but okay. All right. Fantastic. So tell us what your diet's like. What do you eat in a day?
So, I eat more of a Mediterranean diet. That's more of my lifestyle. So, a lot of avocados, a lot of, in particular, certain greens. I'll have a lot of salads with that. And then, of course, I don't even need per se to get that seafood because of the amounts that I'm taking in. But seafood is a source, obviously, of the Mediterranean. I eat lots of walnuts myself, even though I'm taking this product. I still get in, a lot of nuts and seeds, but not an exorbitant amount because that can be pro-inflammatory. And then just getting those good, clean protein sources, and really just trying to add in a lot of fruits and vegetables with that. Again, it's more Mediterranean. I try to vary things up. Um, I'm on the go a lot, so I don't make all of my meals, but I'm not eating processed stuff. I'm eating all organic. The water that I consume, as pure and clean as I can, and just really trying to have my diet be part of my lifestyle and my lifestyle be part of my diet. Really making sure that I can incorporate all these different things in it and really have this balanced lifestyle that, this Mediterranean is promoting, but also I'm not in particular a fan of any one particular diet because I really do believe that even though we all, we're humans and we share many common characteristics and certain needs, I really do believe that we are all individuals and that whatever the diet is best for a person. I mean, obviously you really need to be in tune with that and do a lot of research and, talk with your doctors or practitioners to find out what's best for you. But I feel like it's up to us as individuals to get towards our perfect diet for ourselves. And only we can do that. Of course, we can have help and, great suggestions and support, but I think it's a journey that we all have to undergo to get to a place of, what's best for us, maybe this day, and maybe it changes next week or next month, because I really believe that that does happen where our needs change based on what's happening in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. I've said this numerous times on podcasts that I've been on. I think whether you're vegan or carnivore or somewhere in between, I think that we can all agree that reducing processed foods in the diet and really sticking to whole foods, things that either grow in the ground or have a mother, are probably going to give you the most bioavailable amount of nutrients and probably, prevent a lot of chronic diseases. But I think that based on our genetic backgrounds and our ethnic backgrounds and epigenetic changes in our lifetime, I think that we all do, have to kind of find, I always say, be your own expert and kind of find the diet that works for you, because the only thing that I always tell patients, like, the only thing that will work is what you'll actually do. So, you know,
Exactly.
if you'll take a supplement, great. Okay. You're not going to eat salmon. Okay, cool. Like, let's try and meet in the middle here. But I think that people do have to kind of figure it out for themselves and what works for their lifestyle. And so thank you for sharing that. Okay. Tell us about some of the other things that Ascent Nutrition is doing. I think you guys, I was looking on your website. Tell me about pine needle extract and why the heck people would take that.
Yeah. Okay. So pine needle extract, about a year and a half ago, there was some scientists who came out talking about pine needles and pine needle tea. And it's not that any of it's new. It's just that they had come out with some information, and it went viral sort of within the holistic health, natural health communities. And a lot of people heard about it or resurfaced last year. And one of the main reasons is that there's a compound in pine needles, in particular white pines, called shikimic acid. And shikimic acid is actually the main compound that makes up Tamiflu. And so it has those properties, that a person uses Tamiflu for. And pine needles, white pines, are a rich source of this shikimic acid. But in general, what that's doing is it's cardiovascular health. It's in some ways detoxification. It's a free radical scavenging for sure. It's promoting good bacterial and fungal health. And just, there's a lot of other effects that it can do. I wish I could go deeper on it, but there's some language that, it's just, it's something that is very, sorry, let's cut this out.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, because there's FDA, there's only
yeah,
certain things
exactly.
you can say that things use, that you can use to treat. So
Okay. Yeah. And I'll just start back up. I don't remember where I cut.
that's okay. That's okay.
Um, yeah. Okay. The effects of shikimic acid include cardiovascular effects. It's cardioprotective. It can help support good bacterial levels and fungal levels, and also helps with detoxification in some different ways. Shikimic acid also helps support the health of the myelin sheath, which is like the insulation that wraps around neurons. And so it helps when the myelin sheath is strong and really in a good place functionally. It helps electrical communication and electrical conductivity between the neurons, so they communicate better, and the cellular processes are improved or more efficient.
Fascinating. Fascinating. I did a fellowship in integrative medicine, and trying to memorize all of the different herbs. Like, I'm imagining, like, back in the day when there was a medicine man, and just experimenting with like what things made people better, or it's so fascinating to hear, the science behind it and what we've come to kind of find out about these things inside of our bodies. Okay, another thing that you guys make is coffee. And I'm actually not a huge coffee drinker. I'll drink it occasionally, but certainly I've read a lot of the concerns with coffee and mold toxicity. I see things on Instagram, about this. Can you talk a little bit about that and coffee manufacturing practices? And is that a thing, or?
Yeah, definitely. So what we're doing with our Ascent coffee is we're not using pesticides. So that's the first big thing. There's about 97% of coffee beans are sprayed with pesticides. And obviously that creates a whole host, or can create a whole host of issues. So we want to stay away from those. And that's what we do for sure. And then we take it a step further and we ensure that there's no mold and mycotoxins. And then we lab test this to show this. And we proudly show these results, because we want to give the people trust in this, that, what we're saying is true. With mold and mycotoxins, the mold make these mycotoxins, and these become, in particular, neurotoxic. So they're, really impacting in a negative way the brain and nervous system. And it impacts us in a lot of other ways that can be very hard to diagnose. I mean, I know this, that with mold toxicity, it really depends on the person, the situation, but most clinicians won't even be able to diagnose it as such because it's so hard to actually pinpoint down that, okay, this is coming from mold toxicity, because most people, first and foremost, don't even know that there is such thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it is so prevalent in homes, but most people don't know it. And so they're not even going to bring it up to their doctor. And so the doctor won't know because, I mean, how would they know? But in general, they're neurotoxic. They cause several different issues that, again, can be hard to diagnose and hard to understand, but it's really interrupting the transmission between neurons, the communication. And so when that happens, then it affects really every system in the body, or it can affect every system. And so it really depends on the person and what's going to break down first if there is mold toxicity. So we ensure there is not that in there. And we offer just this pure, clean, amazing tasting coffee. And I mean, it really is, you can tell the difference if you have this for a day or two or longer, and then you go to a different coffee that has pesticides or mold, you can literally taste the difference in it.
Is coffee really one of the major sources of mold and mycotoxins?
Yeah. Coffee is the top one.
Mm,
Eat peanuts are another one.
what about peanut butter?
Yes, yes. And corn is also another one. Those are like the big three.
Hmm. Yeah, and corn consumption coming from Iowa,
Yeah.
the top corn producing state, even though we're the corn huskers. Um, Fascinating, fascinating. What about commercial chains? I guess I won't name them. Famous commercial coffee chains. Do most of their coffee, like, do we know? Has it been tested? Do they contain the mold and mycotoxins? I mean, how prevalent is this in sourcing your coffee?
Yeah, so there's two studies that I've seen showing the coffees that were tested, the samples 50% all the way up to, it was again about 90% had mold present on them, and enough to actually, be concernable. Um, and with that, then there is a sort of, you don't want to be consuming this in the diet, obviously. And then these brands these big brands, are they doing it? They're probably not testing, I would assume. And they probably do have coffee that has mold and mycotoxins in it. Now, how much, I don't know. They probably aren't going to reveal that because it's such a small issue, or it has been in the coffee industry, though it is growing enormously and people are becoming more aware.
Hmm. Fascinating. Well, I'm gonna make my husband listen to this podcast. He drinks way more coffee than I do, but I do on occasion. I actually never drank coffee up until med school. And then it was just kind of this like cultural thing because we would go study at the coffee shops for hours upon hours upon hours. And, I'd have tea, but then I started experimenting with coffee and yeah. So anyway, okay. So I want to wrap this up for people. We're going to swing back to DHA for a second. I end all my podcasts with something called the semen analysis. And I pulled this great study that actually came from 2021. It was published in the Lancet, so big journal, and it's titled Higher Dose DHA Supplementation During Pregnancy and Early Preterm Birth, a randomized double-blind adaptive design superiority trial. So this was actually, they've done tons of meta-analysis that have concluded that omega-3 fatty acids, including DHA, actually reduce preterm birth, and early preterm birth, which is defined as a gestational age of less than 34 weeks. But the amount of DHA in these meta-analysis was very unclear. So the goal of this study was to basically look at how much DHA would you need to be consuming if you were supplementing or trying to get it in the diet. They hypothesized that it would be around 1 gram of DHA per day, and that would be superior to the 200 milligrams, like I highlighted, that is found in most prenatal vitamins. So there's only so many things, you guys, that they can put into a tab or a capsule. If you pull most prenatal vitamins, they're underdosed, not only in DHA, but a lot of other things. Choline is a bulky substance, so you have to be taking multiple capsules of these prenatals to be getting all these things. And so really your diet is what's most important. Okay, but the methods they use, like I highlighted, this is a randomized, multi-center, double-blinded, adaptive design trial. So basically, it just means they did the research in the right way for all of you listening. And it was at multiple sites all over the United States, I believe. And what they found, so there was 1,100 participants, which is a lot of patients, and that is great. And what they essentially found is that out of the 1,100 people that they enrolled, I want to find the exact, so the higher dose of DHA had a lower early preterm birth rate, especially if the participants started with low DHA status at enrollment. So basically, if you get this omega-3 test done and you're really low, you are even going to have a better benefit by supplementing than somebody that already came in with a more normal level. Participants with high enrollment DHA didn't get as much of a dose effect. So this would be important if you're looking at supplementing for a pregnancy, at looking what your pre-pregnancy levels are, because like I said, more isn't necessarily better. So if you already have a good level, then supplementing with a gram or more of DHA probably isn't going to get you any benefit. I don't think it's going to do any harm. We definitely don't see that from the study, but it definitely could be helpful if you're low. But the higher dose was associated with fewer serious adverse events, which included chorioamnionitis, which is infection of the membranes around the baby, premature rupture of membranes, so early water breaking, pyelonephritis, as well as neonatal feeding, genitourinary, and neurologic problems. So very much an anti-inflammatory effect. There was less infection, there was less preterm birth, the babies did better, the babies fed better, and the babies had less neurologic problems. So this, I think, just highlights that clinicians and patients listening should consider a gram of DHA daily during pregnancy to reduce early preterm birth, especially if you have low DHA status. So just want to highlight that there. It is so important for pregnant women and for their babies. And as an OBGYN, I can't highlight that enough. So, all right, Lance, tell people where to find you, where to find Ascent Nutrition and the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Jaime. So lanceschuttler.com is my personal website. I'm on Instagram, also on YouTube. And then Ascent Nutrition is goascentnutrition.com. And we've got all those products there that we talked about and many more coming. And, we're very excited for this. And I appreciate you having me on, Dr. Jaime. This has been a great conversation. And I really wanted to do this to get this particular information out there as of recent, because it's so important for, every human, but in particular, the mothers and the children, to get that DHA in the diet.
I love it. All right. Guess I'm going to have to try some algae oil, you guys. I'll let you know. I'll let you know what I think. All right. Well, Lance, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you guys for listening. Please share this. Please share this with people in your life that would find this information useful. Because like I said, I've checked a lot of levels, you guys, and nobody is normal. So go get your levels checked or start supplementing. Have a great day.